So Nitin currently serves as the Deputy Director for the Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. He supports the CISA Director overseeing the Cyber Division, the Infrastructure Security Division, the National Risk Management Center, and the Emergency Communications Division. His operational support responsibilities are to ensure a holistic approach to critical infrastructure protection across physical and cyber risk activities, which is one of the absolute reasons why I'm happy to have Nitin here today, because that's the mission of our conference as well. Prior to joining CISA in February 2021, Nitin served as an executive at a consulting firm providing subject matter expertise on a variety of topics, including IT, cybersecurity, homeland and national security, critical infrastructure protection, environmental emergency management, continuity of operations, and health and security matters. Nitin also held a number of federal government roles, including serving as a Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Office of Land and Emergency Management at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Director of Critical Infrastructure Policy at the White House National Security Council, and has the Director has the U.S. Health and Human Services overseeing their critical infrastructure, continuity of operations, and medical logistics programs. He also has experience working at the state and local government levels. Nitin started his career spending 13 years as a first responder in New York, including services as a flight paramedic. He was also commander of a federal medical response team based in New York, and has extensive experience deploying to natural and man-made disasters throughout the nation. Nitin holds an undergraduate degree from the State University of New York and graduate degree from the United States Naval Postgraduate Program School. It is my absolute pleasure, Nitin, to welcome you virtually to our campus and to this conference for the first time. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this today.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me here today. Hopefully, while this is the first, hopefully it's the first of many engagements and interactions we'll be able to have with you, with the university, and with all the partners that are on the line today. As Leo mentioned, my name is Nitin Natarajan. I'm the Deputy Director at CISA, kind of the federal government's newest agency, as we like to somewhat think of ourselves. But I want to first thank the University of Oregon and the Technology Association of Oregon for hosting today's event. It's always exciting to have the opportunity to talk about the organization, but more importantly, how we can work with all of you to continue to change the landscape of physical and cyber critical infrastructure security. The event today is happening in partnership between CISA and DHS with the FBI, the Oregon Titan Fusion Center, as part of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And within CISA, we have a lot of events scheduled for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. This week is "Fight the Fish" is our motto for the week, where we are focused on phishing campaigns and what we can better do to prevent them from occurring. And then next week really is going to be a great week talking about the workforce, I think, and something that's critical and important, both for creating the next generation of cybersecurity experts who are going to come into the workforce, but also those that are already in the workforce and how we can better support our efforts as we move forward. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today virtually. We're definitely in different times, and I'm thankful that we have this kind of technology that allows us to gather and share information. But I definitely assure you I would much rather be in Oregon today in person. I think one of the things that, frankly, I've struggled with, I think, during COVID is the lack of ability to engage with people and to really learn from all of you and how we can work together to tackle these complex issues. I think virtual platforms are great. It definitely helps to keep the dialogue open, but I'm really looking forward to getting out into the regions, getting out throughout the nation, being able to meet with many of you in person, and definitely look forward to coming out to Oregon in person one day to be able to have these conversations face to face. Really, at the end of the day, as we look at sharing information, that's really why we're here, right? Whether we're looking at information or data sharing, we know that we're doing this across networks, some of which may be vulnerable to attack, that can really disrupt our lives and our nation's security in a moment's notice. We want to be secure, and security is something we definitely crave, but often emergencies can occur and they definitely upset that opportunity. As Leo mentioned, I started my career working with emergencies as a first responder. through some interesting twists and turns in my career. I've had a wonderful opportunity to be here today in this role. But while my career has taken a lot of different paths, we still deal with emergencies day in and day out. And whether these emergencies are impacts of physical infrastructure, or whether the kind of the myriad of cyber attacks we're seeing, both foreign and domestic, against many of our networks, every one of these is an emergency that we need to deal with. And one of the things we really need to look at is how do we do what we can to change from this kind of reactive response posture and really increasing the resilience and increasing that baseline of security across our organizations so that we can be more resilient against these types of cyber attacks, that we can drive up the cost of cyber attacks for our attackers where it doesn't make it worthwhile for them to continue to do this. Right now the statistics kind of show that we have cyber attacks roughly every 40 seconds. And 1 in 10 of the 1.8 billion websites out there lead you to malware. 1 in 10. And we know that the cybercrime is costing the world trillions of dollars. I want to talk through some interesting statistics because I think often we don't appreciate the global scale and really some of the numbers and the scale and magnitude that we're looking at with these types of events. And then I want to really kind of pare it down to us as individuals and what we can do. We have a global population right now of about 5.2 billion mobile users, and about 4.7 of those are internet users. And 4.3 billion of those are active on social media. I think that number of folks on the internet is growing drastically. I see more and more 2- and 3-year-olds with internet connected devices tapping away on the screen. And so that number is only going to continue to grow in the coming years and over the next decade or two. In 1 internet minute, there were more than 572,000 tweets. There were 1.3 million Facebook logins, 3.4 million snaps sent, 4.7 million YouTube videos watched. I think about 4.5 million of those are from my 2 teenagers. There's 5.5 million Google searches and over 261 million emails sent and received. The numbers are just staggering when we look at this, and these are numbers that are only going to continue to grow in the months and years to come. We have over 21 billion devices connected to the internet, and each of these is a potential vulnerability point. And this number is expected to go to 50 billion in the next 2 years. And if we really sit down and think about it, how many devices we have today that are connected to the internet that we never had years ago? The example I often use is refrigerators. For reasons I don't quite understand, we connect our refrigerators to the internet. I don't, but other people do. And we're connecting all sorts of devices, right, that have internet access. And all of these access points are potential vulnerabilities that we need to hedge against. So the world is becoming increasingly more digitized. And the digital revolution has really brought a lot of good things. It's connected humans around the globe. It's helped to make our lives easier. But again, all of these are more opportunities to cause harm that threaten our schools, our hospitals, our local governments, our pipelines, our businesses throughout the nation. If a computer has a connection to the outside world, it's going to have a risk. A lot of times we've talked about things like air gap systems and separation between our IT systems and our operational technology or OT systems. And what we're finding in a lot of companies and a lot of governments as we look at this is that a lot of those air gaps or things we felt were separated were built over a decade or more. And we're finding that there are connections in a lot of these places that we didn't even know existed. So we really need to understand the risks that we're undertaking. We need to understand what the challenges are. And we need to recognize that the nation's, that all these vulnerability points are for really anything that's connected to the outside world. As a nation's cyber and infrastructure defense agency, CISA is central to the effort of the protection of these types of assets. We're designed unlike anything in your traditional government bureaucracy. We're really trying to become a hybrid of a public-private collaborative. We can't do what we do without all of your support and your collaboration. And we need to build that collaboration on trust, and we need to build it on a regular, consistent engagement that we can work upon. We need to build that upon cooperation, on information sharing, and most importantly, on action between public and private sector partners and all levels of government, not just the federal government, but state, local, tribal, territorial governments need to be involved as well. And that's really at the heart of our goal as we look at raising our collective defense across the nation. CISA has 2 main roles: to serve as the operational lead for federal cybersecurity. This is within the federal, what we call the Federal Civilian Executive Branch, the FCEB, and to serve as a national coordinator for critical infrastructure security and resilience. Really, our mission at the end of the day is to lead the national effort to understand and manage cyber and physical risks to our critical infrastructure. A mission, as you know, that is challenging to execute, but has significant consequences if we fail. The mission can only be accomplished through meaningful and ongoing partnerships with our stakeholders, with all of you. Never has this collaboration mattered more given the threat environment we're facing today, and one that is significantly more serious than even a year ago. Our goal at CISA is to be nimble enough to respond when needed to our partners to assist in defending against attacks and to be timely, relevant, and actionable to help network defenders increase their security. I want to talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing to help meet a lot of these goals and expectations. We're seeing a lot of attacks and incidents across critical infrastructure. In the last year, we've seen issues in the healthcare sector, as it's already been stressed by COVID. These ransomware attacks have, on some systems, have amounted to more than $67 million in revenue. But we have and will continue to see malicious actors and cyber criminals take advantage of disasters to further their causes. A lot of times we refer to these individuals as hackers. And I think when we think about what our vision of a hacker is, right? We think about somebody sitting in a basement somewhere, trying to hack into some type of system. What we are talking about are malicious actors and true cyber criminals. We're talking about organized groups of people that have a lot of resources and a lot of capabilities who are bent on attacking us as a nation and attacking individuals and companies across the nation. We recently launched the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, or the JCDC, to help us win this fight against cyber intrusion. As our Joint Cyber Planning Office, the JCDC is the only federal cyber entity that by statute combines the talents, authorities, and capabilities of the federal cyber ecosystem, CISA, the NSA, FBI, Cyber Command, DoD, and the Director of National Intelligence, with the power of industry to create a common operating pictures of the threat environment and to exercise those plans against the most serious cyber threats to our nation to really implement a coordinated whole of nation cyber defense plan. The idea is to create a proactive capability for government and the private sector to work together before an incident occurs to strengthen our defenses. We need to transition from reactive to being proactive, and again, raising that resilience that we're seeing across the nation. The JCDC will work closely with our sector risk management agencies, such as the Department of Energy, Department of Treasury, Department of Health and Human Services, the EPA, the Transportation Security Agency, Department of Agriculture, and the Food and Drug Administration, who will bring their unique subject matter expertise to the planning table as well. So we're well positioned to take concrete steps to improve cyber defense across our critical infrastructure sectors. Critical infrastructure owners and operators, as well as state and local governments, will play a similar role, bringing your expertise to the discussion and the unique ability to drive cyber defense activities in your jurisdictions. We can't sit here in the Beltway and offer you solutions that are going to work on a local level. Those solutions need to be driven and created with that local expertise. What we want to be able to do is provide some framework. We want to be able to provide the appropriate threat picture and a lot of the information that might help you develop your plans locally. We truly believe that with the assembly of knowledge, we will be better prepared to achieve a deep operational collaboration that ultimately reduces the greatest risk to our nation and our people, and to help in these types of situations where parts of our critical infrastructure are being impacted. As this effort expands, we're going to work with more partners and to move from that reactive phase to a proactive planning phase. I should say that while CISA hosts the JCDC, we put the word joint in there with intent. And it should be considered a platform that belongs equally to all of our key partners. The power to convene is really something that CISA is able to do and the federal government is able to do well, and we want to leverage that ability to bring partners together and to collaborate to solve problems. The intent here with the federal government is not for us to solve problems and to give them to the nation, but to work collaboratively with you to make sure that we're tapping into your experience, your expertise, your capabilities, to develop that solution together and then launch that to help the nation. As we continue to mature and expand the JCDC, I encourage you to reach out to CISA to begin participating in one of our several information sharing programs. In addition to standing up the JCDC, we're leaning forward in several other new authorities that CISA recently received through the National Defense Authorization Act earlier this year, including our new administrative subpoena authority to more effectively notify companies like yours when vulnerable devices are present, to provide cybersecurity training and education opportunities to a wider audience, and establishing a cybersecurity advisory committee. Most of you at home are participating in the summit working virtually. Last November, a Gartner survey found that almost 70% of organizations using cloud services plan to increase their use of the cloud in the wake of the disruption caused by COVID-19. I did a lot of pandemic planning for years, even back in 2009 when we had the 2009 pandemic. And what we determined then was that the ability for the entire workforce across the nation to essentially go into a telework status would not be sustainable by the IT infrastructure that we had. We fast forward to today, we were proven wrong, and I'm glad we were proven wrong, because we've had a lot of transformation in IT infrastructure in the public and the private sectors that have allowed us to do this capability and for us to work remotely from home. The pandemic has caused a seismic shift to that, right, in the work from home that we're seeing. Almost overnight, every company's network went from desks in the office to kitchen tables and home offices. New collaboration software platforms are necessary for daily operations, and they needed to work immediately. And yet many of these solutions increase the overall attack space. They introduce new partners onto your networks, and not all of them are good. Telework has become an important strategy to enable a secure remote workforce, and it relies on the cloud to work. And if the government, like most companies, are going to see an increase in telework and remote work operations in the years to come, coming out of COVID. But the cloud is not inherently more secure. In fact, without a joint focus on strong configurations and collection of analysis of cloud security data, insecurity can migrate to the cloud. Every one of your companies and organizations must have a clear focus on finding, building, and maintaining trusted relationships with service providers and software companies. CISA can be the partner to help you better understand the risk associated with increased cloud activity, and even offer solutions to reduce that risk. Many of our online assessment tools and safety tabs can be a starting place to help you evaluate your company's risk. One of the things I always say about risk when we look at this, we spend a lot of time on risk identification. We spend a lot of time on risk mitigation. But we need to remember that any risk that we identify and we don't mitigate, we're accepting. And I think we often forget about the risk acceptance element of that. So as you look within your organizations, within your companies, within your government, really having that ability to truly assess your risk, truly understand what is being mitigated, but really being eyes wide open as to what risk you're accepting, and making sure that that risk acceptance is being done at the right level to understand the enterprise-wide risk that folks are going to be taking on. A recent report on the state of cloud security said that 98% of the 200 CISOs surveyed reported to their companies that they'd experienced a cloud data breach in the last 18 months. 98% out of 200 CISOs surveyed reported that. 63% of companies surveyed said their organization had sensitive data exposed in the cloud. And 85% of organizations said they plan to increase their funding this year, with a considerable portion being allocated to cloud infrastructure security. To ensure companies don't fall victim of breaches, we provided our industry and government partners with a series of recommendations to strengthen their cloud security practices. Recently, we issued an alert urging Microsoft Cloud customers to reset their security keys in light of a recent vulnerability that may have exposed customer data. At the end of the day, we know that our adversaries will continue to target cloud services and tools. And while cloud adoption poses some risk, the benefits are far greater. But it's imperative that we jumpstart our cloud migration efforts with modern security concepts at the beginning of implementation. Security needs to be baked into the cake instead of added on later. We need to think with a security-first approach. We need to build security, whether physical or cyber, as we develop new systems, as we build new buildings, as we take on new capabilities. Cloud adoption across the federal government enterprise will provide agencies an array of hosting platforms and solutions that enhance mission and service delivery. Despite the progress made to modernize federal cybersecurity, we know that gaps persist and have grown. Recently, the federal government, and we truly feel the federal government needs to lead by example. We need to strengthen our IT ecosystem that the American people rely on. The cyber events that our nation has faced over the past months have mobilized us in ways that have recently resulted in an executive order calling for federal departments and agencies to implement stronger cybersecurity standards. As part of this call to action, the order instructs federal departments and agencies to move towards secure cloud services and build a zero trust architecture. It also mandates the deployment of multi-factor authentication and encryption across the federal enterprise. And we cannot stress enough the importance of multi-factor authentication and the vital role that it plays in continuing to enhance the security of our cyberspace. To help with these changes, CISA recently developed a cloud security technical reference architecture and a zero trust maturity model that will help federal agencies as they implement data protection measures by leveraging zero trust architecture and greater use of the cloud. when we work with the federal civilian executive branch, we do have a lot of documents we're able to produce and guidance that we can share with our partners. But we definitely encourage all of you to leverage those resources to help you tackle these complex issues. To further aid in the adoption of cloud and new technology across the federal government, CISA has released the Trusted Internet Connection guidance documents to help federal civilian agencies with their transition to contemporary architecture and cloud services. The guidance become more apparent and accelerated as the COVID-19 pandemic has forced agencies to embrace mass telework. While we're helping other federal agencies in their modernization efforts, we're also looking internally and working to modernize our own cyber programs so that we can be fully functional with cloud computing environments with zero trust architecture. More simply put, we can't work to improve the adoption of cloud services and strengthen the security of these tools without you. We truly believe that cybersecurity is a team sport and that we work better together. We have now released the initial cloud security technical reference architecture guidance to the public, and we're working with industry partners to enhance this and develop case studies to better understand how to improve the security challenges for all of us. CISA has been directed to develop cybersecurity performance goals that are consistent across all critical infrastructure sectors. The preliminary goals focus on security of industrial control systems and will broaden the cover of cybersecurity performance across sectors. These goals will help all organizations measure their own security and evaluate security for vendors, partners, and providers. These performance goals will move us forward in addressing this shared challenge and make it easier for all of you to justify the needed security investments within your organizations. I want to take a moment to talk about the threat environment. While you're watching and evaluating your own systems, CISA is keeping the same close eye on the threat environment that affects our security of our nation's systems and networks. Our threat hunting teams proactively seek out cyber threats that may be lurking undetected in a network, while our vulnerability management team identifies, evaluates, and reports on security vulnerabilities in systems and software. I started with the statistic that every 40 seconds there's a cyber attack somewhere. And from when I started speaking, there possibly could have been 12 major cyber attacks. From the SolarWinds supply chain compromise to the exploitation of vulnerabilities found in Microsoft Exchange servers, Pulse Connect secure devices, and Windows Print Spooler, to ransomware attacks affecting entities from Colonial Pipeline to JBS Foods to Kaseya Software, the consequences of weak cybersecurity are being felt in real life. And in Portland alone, there were scores of tech companies all relying on systems that, if not well protected, could be vulnerable to an attack. I'm not suggesting any of them have been, but if we're not diligent and if government and businesses don't collaborate to prevent such attacks, we're doing our communities a disservice. Checkpoint Research recently came out with a report that found ransomware attacks surged a staggering 93% in the last 6 months. And we know that cybercrime isn't only getting more frequent, it's also getting more expensive. The bad actors behind these tactics can be nation states, ransomware gangs, or hacking groups that resemble major criminal organizations, threatening the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our information, our privacy, our identity, our critical infrastructure, and frankly, our way of life. As the nation's civilian cyber defense agency, CISA is central to this effort. The creativity, selflessness, and courage of the workforce at CISA, as well as our partners, and all of you here in the audience, are how we will build our nation's resilience now and into the future. And this is how we will move forward together to increase our resilience across the nation. Securing our nation's most vital systems and functions is a shared responsibility. And I ask that you continue to innovate new solutions, that you continue to be an advocate for strong security, that you continue to partner with CISA to enhance our collective defensive mechanisms. Our role at CISA is to serve as your trusted partner and to help ensure that you have the information, resources, and tools needed to secure your networks and improve the security of your partners. From a national perspective, we see some gaps between what an entity may consider adequate security for themselves or their sector and what is in the public's best interest. Across the government and critical infrastructure sectors, we still see common problems, such as outdated applications and operating systems. It is essential that organizations update software and operating systems with the latest patches. I'm actually shocked at the volume of times that we see this being an issue, that patching alone can make a significant issue. Now, I don't say that lightheartedly. Patching large networks and patching large infrastructure, especially in organizations that may not have a large IT staff, is a challenge. So looking at identifying ways that we could work together to get the systems where they need to be, to reduce the risk to the owners and operators and users is going to be critical. We're also continuing to see cybersecurity issues rooted in human factors. Poor password practices, not enabling multi-factor authentication, clicking on unsafe URLs, opening attachments in unsolicited emails, and improper configuration are just a few of the human errors that lead to a security threat, many of which could be easily avoided through good cyber hygiene. I'm a firm believer people will click on anything. And we need to do what we can to get people to have a higher index of suspicion when they receive emails that just don't seem right. I'm also a firm believer that if somebody's going to give me $1 million, it's not going to be via email. Someone's going to show up to my house, they're going to give me a big check, and that's how I'm going to win. But I'm not going to get an email where I'm going to have those types of financial paydays. So we need to get people thinking about that higher index of suspicion, excuse me, when it comes to these types of things. We need to talk about poor password practices. We need to talk about not taping your password on the back of underneath your keyboard. And we need to talk about enabling things like multi-factor authentication, which really can make a difference. I'll make a plug for our website, stopransomware.gov. One of the things we tried to do in the federal government is bring together a lot of our ransomware resources into a central location so that information from CISA, from HHS, from the FBI, and others are on that single website so that folks can use those tools and information to help you carry the message to your partners, to your families, to your places of worship, to your schools, to your workplaces, to ask these questions to ensure that we are taking the steps that we need to increase our overall security posture. We want to get the nation to the point where when we look at, say, finding a new bank, that we're looking at banking services that have built-in multi-factor authentication versus those that haven't, and really understanding those types of risks that might be at bay, and making a decision, a risk-based decision on where you want to go, but knowing enough to be able to ask those questions so that you can use that to drive your decision-making. We want to work towards common security standards and continue to work together to build a culture of collective defense, because teamwork and community are how we're going to achieve the secure and resilient infrastructure that makes us all safer across the nation. So I have an ask of all of you. First, partner with us to raise the security baseline of our products, services, networks, and practices, and make the internet a safer place. Since the agency was created to work across all critical infrastructure sectors, the intelligence community, and with our international partners, CISA is in a unique position to capture a holistic view of the threat landscape. Working with us and sharing information helps paint a clear picture so we can spot malicious activity and we can act quickly. The sooner we're able to get information of an attack, the sooner we're able to understand the scope and scale, the sooner we're able to understand the indicators of compromise and the tactics, techniques, and procedures involved, the quicker that we can use that information to help protect your neighbors, to protect your fellow companies within the sector, to protect other government entities against that same type of an attack. And we need to do that in a common dialogue. We need to have an open line of communication and a trusted relationship in order to do that. Next, in an environment where cyber incidents are increasing by the day, CISA also regularly deploys expert teams to help entities mitigate and recover from cyber incidents. And we stand ready to provide our services to any organization that has experienced a cyber attack. So let us help. CISA has a number of partners in the regions, in your communities throughout the nation. We have over 500 employees that are not in the DC area, but are actually throughout the nation in your communities to help you build your physical resilience, your cyber resilience, and your emergency communications resilience. We want to talk about public-private partnerships and start pivoting from a partnership into a public-private operational collaboration, and really look at information sharing and continue to get feedback from you that can ensure that we can continue to refine our products to make them useful to you. I'm a firm believer in what I've talked to our folks here in CISA. I would much rather publish 50 documents a year that allow you to take action in your communities, that allow you to take action on your networks, to allow you to increase your security, than 500 documents a year just to say we did 500 documents a year. We need to ensure that our products that we're putting out there truly can better inform your decision making. For me, information sharing has come down to a single mantra, and I say this kind of everywhere I can when it comes to information sharing, that our goal needs to be, how do we get the right information to the right people in a timely manner that results in more informed decision making? Doesn't necessarily mean the decision is going to change, but at least that decision is more informed. And we need to do that in collaboration with all of you. because I don't want to sit here in DC and guess and assume what information you need. I want to hear from all of you on what information is helpful and how do we tailor our products and our abilities to be able to do that. Finally, we are uniquely positioned to bring together stakeholders from across the intelligence community, law enforcement, the Department of Defense, federal government agencies, state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, the private sector, international partners, and the public to enhance cyber threat information sharing to stop cyber incidents before they occur and to quickly recover when they do. We ask you to join the critical infrastructure community as a cybersecurity expert. I'm glad to make a shameless plug and say that we'd love to have folks on the CISA team. But whether you join at the state and local level, at the tribal territorial level, in the private sector, in a nonprofit, in a volunteer organization, in federal service, in uniform, in the military, across the broad spectrum of opportunities, be an advocate for cybersecurity, be an advocate for critical infrastructure protection, be a mentor in your local community, build relationships with high schools and college students, and help them chart a path into a cybersecurity career. Use your voice to be an evangelist for cybersecurity. Again, within your organizations, within your school districts, within your community. Ask the tough questions and don't settle for the answers that we often hear of, I got it, we're fine, don't worry about it, it's okay, we've done this before. Ask the deeper probing questions. Really understand the current risk posture, understand what risks are truly being mitigated and which may not within your respective communities, within your organizations. Lastly, we're thankful to be here to present at an event such as this. I want to thank all of you for your time today. I want to definitely leave some time for any questions that folks may have. And I encourage you to engage with CISA and let us help you as we work together to keep our businesses and communities safe from cyber threats. CISA truly is here to defend today and secure tomorrow. And we really need to focus both in the short term and the long term as we increase our resilience across the nation. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today, and happy to talk through any questions that folks may have.
Nitin, thanks a lot for that talk. Very informational, and I think we get a lot out of it. I'm personally happy that CISA is there, and as University of Oregon, we've used several services that's offered through CISA, both from a technical standpoint as well as consultation, working with our local reps in the area, and so on. So I'm absolutely happy that the agency exists and is here to help us. The one question I have for you to kick this off is just generally, you've been at CISA around the federal government for a while. What's your general sense after hearing all these things that's going on in the news today? That you talk about Colonial Pipeline and the JBS speech and so on. But even individuals, just a basic, a regular person at home, have a lot to worry about these days around cyber and their privacy online and their bank accounts and everything like that. So if you had to answer the question to just a regular person asking, can we survive? How big are the threats? How confident are you that we're going to be able to survive just the onslaught of what's coming at us over the next few years?
I think we're going to get there. I think, we need to stay one step ahead of the adversary. And I think that we need to recognize and acknowledge the fact that the threat landscape has changed. The targets that we're looking at, the targets that folks normally, when we look at cybersecurity 10 years ago, right, we thought about targets being the federal government, large defense contractors, international companies, right? We never thought about the individual as a potential target for cyber attack. But we've seen that individuals are targeted for cyber attacks. We're seeing it's not just the New York Cities and the LAs and the San Franciscos and the Portlands of the world, but it's small rural communities that are being attacked with cyber attack. And if folks have had a chance to look at the media about ransomware attacks and the discussion and the research and the dialogues that these criminal enterprises use, it's shocking, right? This truly is a business enterprise then. I've seen conversations go back and forth where jurisdictions have said, we don't have that kind of money to pay that type of a ransom. And these ransomware actors have said, we know how much is in your bank account. We've done the research. We know how much money you have, and we know that you can pay it. So we are up against criminal enterprises that are doing this. And again, not just at a large scale, but with individuals. But I have hope. I have hope that we are able to get the message out there to the community. We're able to increase that index of suspicion. I'm optimistic about the next generation coming in. How do we bake in cybersecurity into the next generation? And, I kind of jokingly said earlier, there's a lot of 2 and 3 year olds that are walking around with iPad or crawling around and walking around with iPads these days, right? And I have kids in high school, and I look at them, and while they were very tech savvy, I don't know how much they think about cybersecurity in their day-to-day interactions, right, with their fellow students and in the classroom. So the more that we can do, and we have an effort underway to work with K through 12 schools throughout the nation and provide information that they could get to K through 12 students to bake that cybersecurity information in. To me, I kind of equated to decades ago when we did the duck and cover videos, right? When we thought there was going to be an impact of a nuclear attack, we all, everyone ducked beneath their desk, and that was going to protect us. Now, I'm not going to debate whether or not hiding beneath our desk in a nuclear attack is the right defensive measure or not. But if we could really ingrain this into that next generation that's coming up in a very technologically advanced position, we're going to be able to get them to really think cyber first, to think security first in all that they do as they continue to enter the workforce, as they continue to enter into colleges and universities, as they continue to become leaders and managers in organizations, and they will continue to ask those questions. So I am optimistic. I mean, despite what we see day in and day out, but it's going to take our effort now to patch where we are today and to make sure we are giving that next generation a fighting chance at doing this.
Oh, I love that. I love the reference to the sort of duck and cover approach, because as you know, this thing starts at the elementary school level, right? If we're going to change this, it's going to have to take a lot of effort going forward. One of the things I struggle with is everything that we do in cybersecurity, from awareness training to vulnerability management, it all costs money, right? And as you said, there are some that's less fortunate in terms of the financial standing. It could be a small city, or it could just be an individual. It could be an area in a city that doesn't have a lot of money to spend. And in order for us to say have teachers in schools, have curriculum that includes some form of cybersecurity component, that's going to take money to do, right? It's going to take a lot to convince these school districts and all that to make this happen. So I'm wondering what's your thoughts, or what sort of discussion is happening at the federal level? You mentioned that the way CISA is working is you're working across agencies. So, when you talk to, say, the Department of Education, are they thinking long-term about how do we educate the next generation, and where's the money going to come from to do that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, we're having those conversations and trying to figure out how, again, collectively together we can raise that generation into where we need to go. And I think it's a challenge, right? We're never going to have the resources and the money that we need to do this effectively. What we want to really look and do is how do we maximize shared services, right? And whether those are shared services in the traditional IT sense, or whether it's just sharing resources and capabilities and programs, right? So there are programs across the federal government, there's programs across state government where information is shared routinely, right, with end users, right, with individuals and communities. How do we get our message embedded into that? So we don't have to stand up an entire parallel system of information sharing if we can tap into existing mechanisms that already exist. I spent a lot of time in the public health world, and in public health, one of the things we tried to do is when we were dealing with pandemic planning years ago was how do we get a message about pandemic preparedness into the community? And there were all these discussions about we were going to create a specific parallel path to engage with these communities. But really what we needed to do was look internally and really identify the programs we already had. We had visiting nurse programs in the city I worked in that already went into homes every single day. Why don't we use them to carry the message for us? We already had engagements with places of worship and with schools throughout the community. Why didn't we work with them to be able to carry our message? They were already trusted partners. They were already trusted members of that community, and they can help carry that communication with us. So I think as we look at this, we need to look at how do we share that information more broadly? How do we look at the resources we have? I think the other piece of it is when we look at information sharing is all of you are making justifications for budget within your respective organizations. You are talking to your leadership, you're talking to your local elected officials, you're talking to your CEOs, you're talking to your boards of directors to say we need to invest in cybersecurity. What is the argument that you are making? Is it we need to invest in cybersecurity because we know that there's bad actors that are attacking people around the world? Frankly, if I was on the receiving end of that dialogue, I'm not sure how powerful that is. But if we're able to give you the information, if we're able to enhance our information sharing, if we're able to look at the data that we can get our hands on and say that universities across the nation are being attacked X amount of times per month and, are suffering this type of monetary loss or this other type of impact, X, Y, and Z, that's a very different argument that you're having as you look at building that justification locally for those increased resources. So we really want to take a multi-pronged approach as we look at this. How do we share a lot of that information? And how do we kind of arm all of you with the knowledge that you need to build those business cases and those justifications? At the same time, how do we leverage existing information sharing channels? And how do we leverage some traditional shared service capabilities that we can help take care of those that do not have the organic capability to grow? I met with, over the last 6 months, I've had an opportunity to meet with a lot of states and cities and talking about their capabilities. I remember I had a city a while ago that approached me and said, we have a SOC. Our SOC is this person right here. That person is our SOC. And I'm assuming that person sleeps. I mean, I'm sure the person's really great. I'm sure the person works a lot, but I'm sure at some point that person sleeps. And our SOC cannot be one person, no matter how great they are, right? So how do we look at these types of capabilities to really change the landscape of where we are? And I think kind of this multi-pronged approach is the answer. We need to look at places where the federal government can help, but again, I don't think we're ever going to get the budget federally, nor I think should we, that's going to fund everything across the nation, right? That's just not, if that's what we're waiting for, we're not going to get there. But I think we need to better leverage the resources we have across the nation to work together to get there.
And that together is the important piece, right? Because the SOC is a good example because I can point to multiple SOCs across Oregon now, just in our community, but there's less people working together, right? So you may have one guy over here that is a SOC for his organization, another person over the other side that's a SOC, but there's less of those people coming together to form sort of a joint SOC. Right, and then if you carry that further, why don't we have more joint SOCs with the federal government and state government? So because we're all seeing the same information, we're just seeing it at different times, and so as a result of that, decisions are not made as we'd like it to be. So I wonder, from your standpoint or from your vantage point as Deputy Director, what advice do you have for us in terms of increasing the amount of sharing that we do among ourselves as community, right? Because this conference is all about that whole community approach. So we bring together physical security, emergency management, cybersecurity, all of it, and find ways to talk to each other. What sort of advice do you have for us as practitioners on this conference in terms of how we can go forward sharing some more?
So I think there's a couple of aspects of it. I think one is reach out. I think all too often we wait for somebody to invite us to the table. And I've always been a person who knocked on the door or kind of pushed on the door or yanked on the door or tried to push it down to get a seat at the table. I think all too often we don't understand the criticality of other sectors, of other partners at the table, because we don't know their industry, right? We don't know the details of the impact that they have on a community. So for me, it's really come down to a lot of things. It's come down to sitting down at the table and having that dialogue and opening the door and sitting down. The other thing to me is building trust. As we look at things like information sharing, as we look at things like emergency response, there is no technological limitation on information sharing. We don't lack the ability to invite the entire nation onto a SharePoint site and post documents, right? And do those types of things. A lot of information sharing is not a technological barrier, it's an individual barrier, right? It's a matter of building trust between organizations, not between people, right? We start with people, but we need to raise that to organizations. The way I look at it when I've been in an organization I've been in is a lot of the information and sharing that happened was a one-to-one, is that somebody trusted me and I trusted them and we did that information sharing. That dies when one of those two parties leaves an organization, right? We need to really escalate our relationships and our trust from the individual level to the corporate kind of organizational level. Once we can do that, we can really build long-lasting relationships and long-lasting collaborations that are going to allow that information sharing to occur in a trusted environment. A lot of the challenges I see in information sharing when I talk to folks throughout the nation, again, is about the people. It's not about the technology. And so, but it takes time. It takes time to build trust. It takes time to build that collaboration. And none of us have time, right? None of us have the staff we need to execute our mission. None of us have the resources and funding to execute our mission. None of us, don't have that 25th hour in the day to be able to do it. But we need to figure out a way to put this together and to really focus on those foundations so that we can move forward. Because I truly believe that that's what's going to help all of us work together to move the bar forward.
Yeah, no, that's an important answer. And I'm starting to see some of that take place at local levels, right? So the local Information System Security Association chapters and the local audit chapters, in different localities, people are coming together and starting to share. But you're right, it's unofficial, right? It's not a corporate arrangement. It's more of I can pick up the phone and call this person across the street that I know. And we somehow need to make that a little bit more formalized. Rob has a question or a comment here in the chat that talks about, what if certain cybersecurity or certain cyber defense features become expenses that we can potentially get some form of tax benefit on. I'm wondering, and sort of going back to an earlier conversation we had with Vint Cerf and some others in this conference, we were talking about there are certain basic things that an individual need to have, right? They need to be able to identify themselves. So we're talking about the possibility of digital certificates for everybody, or everybody should be doing multi-factor authentication, but it costs money. So are there certain basic things that not just the federal government, but government, state government, and others can sort of start looking at how do we get these things in the hands of everybody, regardless of their financial status as an individual? What's your take along those lines?
I think those are the conversations we're starting to have, right? I think that, like one of the things that we are pushing very heavily during Cybersecurity Awareness Month is multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is great if you have a cell phone. Multi-factor authentication is great if you have a key device, right? Like these are all great tools to have, but not everybody has access to those types of tools and capabilities. So we're having those discussions now of how do we do this nationwide? How do we do this for those that have as well as for those who don't have? To increase that dialogue. I'm not sure we have an answer yet, but we want to figure out what role should the federal government play. I'm a firm believer the federal government definitely can play a role. There's areas that we can help. There's areas that frankly are probably are better suited for others to help, right? And not necessarily have a federal solution. I'm a firm believer the federal government is not always the best solution to every problem. And sometimes we have a role to play, and we welcome that opportunity and want to play that role. And other times, it's probably best for us to take a little bit of a back seat and provide support and let others take lead. And so what we really want to do and what we're spending a lot of time on now is working with our partners to understand where are those areas that we should be leaning a little bit more forward in, and where are those areas that perhaps are not in our bailiwick, and we need to take a little bit of a step back and let others take lead, and understanding kind of how best we can support that. To me, I'm also a firm believer that there's such thing as too much help. So I really want to make sure that we are providing the right amount of help that truly is helpful, and not too much help that ends up causing more problems down the road.
I'm the government, and I'm here to help.
Yep.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about cyber insurance. I think there's a lot of interest here on this conference on the topic. We had a really exciting panel just before your session to talk about cyber insurance. One of the things we're starting to notice over the last year or so is that insurance premiums are going up and coverage is going down. In fact, some insurers are really walking away from covering cyber security, or at least definitely not ransomware, right? So 5 years ago, lots of organizations sort of had that as their fallback plan. If I had a big breach, well, I'm just going to tap into my insurance and I'll get some help that way. If we see the cyber insurance industry starting to go in the other direction of not wanting to do coverage, or actually starting to raise the bar before you can even get coverage, this is another area where I'm thinking government may have to step in and play a role. Are there discussions around that, and what are your thoughts around what's going on with the cyber insurance industry these days?
I mean, we're having those discussions with our federal colleagues, with Treasury and elsewhere throughout the federal government to really understand what is the landscape. We've heard from a lot of partners about this changing landscape in cyber insurance. I talked to a private sector partner yesterday that talked about they just renewed their plan. The premiums had gone up, but not only had the premiums gone up and the coverage had stayed similar, I don't think it had gone down as much. The work that they needed to do to qualify for the plan had increased significantly, right? So even though the coverage remained somewhat similar, the work that they had to do to be eligible for that insurance had grown drastically over the last time. Now, luckily, this company was rather proactive the last 7 months, 12 months, and didn't have to do much to meet that bar. But we know that that's going to be a challenge and a sticking point for many partners as they look at either establishing new policies or renewing policies. So we're having the discussions with our partners in the federal government to understand kind of what role can the government play, what role should the government play, as we look at this kind of dynamic landscape. I think as we look, as you said several years ago, there wasn't a lot of uptake, and people were trying to decide, do I even want to do this or not? And now we've gotten to a place where a lot of people are buying into cyber insurance, but we're seeing that landscape change. And so, you know, I don't want to inject the federal government where we may not be helpful, but we want to make sure we have a robust dialogue with our partners across the federal government to make sure that we bring the right experts to the table to have those discussions. I mean, CISA has, you know, a great team. We have a number of a lot of folks that have private sector experience, a lot of folks that understand that industry, but we really want to work with our partners at Treasury and elsewhere as we start to have some of these discussions to make sure that we're truly helping where we can, and whether it's, you know, providing guidance where we can, providing information where we can, as we move forward on that.
Awesome, thanks for that. So Nitin, to sort of wrap things up, we have a wide cross-section of people on the call today. We have cybersecurity practitioners, we have emergency management people, we have IT folks who some have aspirations of making the transition to cybersecurity, and we have students from different backgrounds, right? From law, from IT, and different areas. What sort of advice do you have for people looking to make that switch from wherever they are today to get into cybersecurity, especially with the shortage that we have now? What advice do you have for people who are looking to get on the dark side of cybersecurity here?
Do it, right? I mean, I kind of tell people jokingly, if I could end up here, anyone can end up here, right? If you look at my background and where I came from, you know, I think it takes a lot of people with a lot of diverse backgrounds, a lot of different experiences to help us execute this mission. And whether that's here within CISA, or whether that's at state, local, tribal, territorial governments, whether it's in the private sector, whether it's in academia, it takes people of all backgrounds to truly address the cybersecurity risk. Look at CISA, for example, right? We need people who are, I kind of call them zeros and ones, right? The very technical cyber folks, the folks on our hunt teams, the folks on our vulnerability management teams, the super technical folks that can go out there and make the change. But we need a ton of other people to help us be successful in our cybersecurity mission. We need people who know policy. We need people who know information sharing and communications. We need people who can help develop partnerships, public-private partnerships across the nation and globally. We need international affairs experts that can help us build relationships and expand our relationships with our global partners as we work with them. We just had a new program come out this year called CISA Global, and you know, how do we expand our international partnerships with all of them? On top of all of that, to execute our cybersecurity mission, we need budget people, we need finance people, we need facilities people, we need everything to keep the organization going, and we all are committed to tackling cybersecurity and to increasing the resilience of our cybersecurity mission. So what I tell folks is, whether people are coming out of high school and looking to enter the workforce, whether they're going into college, whether people are mid-career and they're reskilling or upskilling and they want to come into cybersecurity, there is a place for you within cybersecurity organizations. There is a place for everything from attorneys to budget to ethical hackers, to policy experts, to across the entire spectrum. There is a role that you can play to help strengthen cybersecurity across our nation. So I want to get people to not think of, am I technical enough to be in cybersecurity? Because everybody has that role to play. Now we need some super technical people, right? We're definitely going to need that as well. But we really can find a place for everyone within what we do. We do a lot of education work. We do a lot of K-12 outreach. We do a lot. We're going to embark on expanding a lot of our university partnerships and engagements. So people who come from those types of backgrounds are helpful as well. So it really is that spectrum of individuals that are going to help us in CISA execute our mission well. And we are not unlike a lot of state offices, local governments, private companies that need those similar resources to help support their cyber missions.
Thank you very much. Hopefully somebody will drink the Kool-Aid. That's my mission in life, right? To get as many people into cybersecurity as we can. We can use the help. Nitin, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and your presentation was pretty good. We got some really good information to take away. But more importantly, I'm hoping the audience learns a little bit more about CISA because it's a fantastic organization. It's been pretty helpful to us as the University of Oregon, and I recommend that others reach out to their local contacts as well. It's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Nitin.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here.